Are you ready?
Yeah.
Yes! This is the Ross Kaminsky Show.
You're a great American.
Now, Ross Kaminsky.
Come on, man.
On Denver's talk station, 630 KHOW.
All right, good morning. It's Friday. Yesterday during the show, I mentioned to you the breaking news at the time that there had been an explosion at the airport in Kabul, Afghanistan. And then it was just developing during the show yesterday morning. I mentioned, what I was seeing on the screen as far as reports of a second bomb. By the time I had left the studio yesterday, we didn't really have anything in the way of numbers, but over the course of the rest of the day yesterday, we're now at 13 U.S. service members dead and 18 Americans wounded and dozens of Afghans killed and wounded. And just what a horrific thing. I'm obviously thinking about this all afternoon yesterday, all night, and thinking about, even my emotional reaction to it, which I think was first horror, then sadness, then anger, and then something like embarrassment or shame for this country. Not sure exactly what the right word is. In that order, and I think in that order of importance, horror being the first. I'll tell you, and we're going to spend a little more time on this in a few minutes, but I caught Joe Biden's press conference. I didn't want to, but I felt like it was very important and I needed to. So I watched or listened to, half and half, Joe Biden's press conference. I caught the first part of it while I was in the car. I was listening to it on the radio. And I literally am not allowed, based on FCC rules, to share on these airwaves what I was yelling at the radio, what I was yelling at Joe Biden as he began his press conference. And I'm not going to play this part. We've got some other audio. I'm not going to play this part. But he began the press conference by talking about, how great the airlift is going and how much he respects the military. And then he talked about his son. There was... I'll get to the press conference in a minute. I'm just telling you, what I was yelling at my radio would have made a sailor blush. Channeling my previous career on the trading floor in Chicago, where that kind of language was commonplace, but I was so angry. What happened yesterday, and I say this without a partisan angle. I say this just as an American watching what's going on. What happened yesterday is, in my opinion, 99% the fault of Joe Biden, and that might be a little low. And a lot of people, including Biden, want to keep making this question about whether or not America should have withdrawn from Afghanistan entirely. It's a debate that's been going on for as long as the war has been going on, for 20 years. You know which side of that I'm on, but that's not the point. I used a bad analogy on Twitter the other day, and I'm going to share it with you, not in an attempt to be funny, but just, to give you a sense of the ridiculousness of Biden's ongoing effort to make it sound like the debate about all this and the anger and frustration about all this is just about a disagreement about whether or not we should be getting out of Afghanistan, which is not what people are pissed off about, primarily. And I imagine Joe Biden saying, and this is just bad analogy club stuff, so bear with me. But Joe Biden saying, I had to get my car home. And the police officer saying, yeah, but did you have to get drunk and kill 3 people in the crosswalk doing it? And then Biden saying, Donald Trump told me I had to get my car home. You get the idea. And again, it's not intended today as a joke. I think you understand the point I'm trying to make. So let's think about this for a minute. I should mention, by the way, we got Jack Carr back on the show in the 8 o'clock hour. 8:05, Jack Carr is going to come back. He was on recently, but I really needed to have him back in the aftermath of what happened yesterday in Kabul. He's been all over the media. He was on Tucker Carlson recently, and I saw him on some other show yesterday. And he's been on TV a lot, but I think he has the best conversations here. I've also got former Congressman Justin Amash in studio in the 9 o'clock hour, and we're going to talk about this, among other things. He's visiting Colorado for a Libertarian Party thing. So let's think about this. The timing of what's going on here is entirely Biden's fault, even as he wants to try to lay it off on Trump. And here's what I mean. It's not so much the August 31st deadline, although that has become a big problem because of how he's mismanaged everything. But remember, Trump wanted to get out even earlier than that. The problem is not so much that the deadline was on such and such a date. It was that Biden didn't have anything going other than shutting down Bagram Air Force Base and doing other things to make our eventual last mission as difficult and dangerous as it could possibly be. But other than that, he didn't do stuff like start the process of evacuating Americans from Afghanistan or, evacuating our Afghan allies, the people that we made promises to that, hey, we're not going to let you be killed by the Taliban. He didn't start that until so close to the deadline that it made it impossible. And I guess they would say, well, we didn't know the Taliban was going to take over and we'd have this situation. You are supposed to do what you said, which was plan for every contingency. You said you planned for every contingency. You clearly didn't. And the problem is not really that there's an August 31st deadline. It's that there's a deadline of whatever given date, but that you didn't start doing the time-consuming work until much too close to that deadline, whatever the deadline happened to be. So that's one thing. The timing of this is Biden's fault. Now, again, I suppose the administration would say, we just didn't know that the Taliban would come back and get in control so fast. But the reason that the Taliban was able to get in control so fast is that we withdrew support from the Afghan military and government so fast before we were actually ready to leave. We cut way back on any kind of close air support and every other kind of support. And instead, we're just like handing them weapons and armored vehicles that they barely know how to use. And now the Taliban has all this stuff. But because of the way that Biden did that and allowed the Taliban to take over so fast, that left us in a position where, and also it didn't have to be this way, but this was sort of the easiest, most spineless way to do it. So that's what Biden did. And I'm talking about the fact that we did not push out from the gates of the airport and put a bigger perimeter much further away from the airport to keep bad guys away. And yes, of course, if we had, a station where there were members of the American military, some distance from the airport, right? Whether it's 100 yards or a mile or whatever it would be, yeah, they would be potentially vulnerable to attack as well. But at least you wouldn't have had a perimeter that is right up against your own wall where there are hundreds or thousands of civilians packed right there. So that the lack of a perimeter is Biden's fault. The fact that there was a crowd is due to the fact that Biden didn't start the process of evacuating people until so close to the deadline that they all felt a need, and I don't blame them one bit, to get to the airport as quick as possible to make sure they get out in this very narrow window that is potentially available to get out of the country. So they all end up crowding at the airport. That is Biden's fault, too. How is any of this not Joe Biden's fault? And again, this is not a matter of my picking on Joe Biden because he's a Democrat or because I didn't vote for him or anything like that. This is just fact. Joe Biden has caused the death so far of 10 Marines, 2 soldiers, and a Navy corpsman. Please don't say corpsman. 13 so far. We don't know what other attacks are still coming. How insane is it that because of Joe Biden, we are relying on our terrorist enemy, the Taliban, or as Joe Biden puts it, the Taliban. How insane is it that we are relying on the Taliban for our perimeter cordon? Can you imagine if after the 9/11 attacks and the shoe bomber and the underwear bomber, and we've got the TSA going on, protecting people at the airport. We can debate another day whether it's particularly effective, but imagine if that were set up by staffing the TSA with members of Al-Qaeda, with people who hate America. Would you staff the TSA with Islamo-fascists and think, oh, this is going to work well? They're going to do their very, very best to protect Americans and make sure that bombs don't get onto airplanes. That's what we've done in Kabul. That's what we've done leaving the Taliban in charge of the perimeter, relying on the Taliban to keep us safe. And all of this nonsense about, oh, don't worry, the Taliban and ISIS, they hate each other. Come on. It's not nearly as much as they both hate us. We've seen, for just as another example, right? Hamas is Sunni, Iran is Shiite, and we're told, oh, they don't like each other, and the radical Shiites and the radical Sunnis, they don't get along. But of course, when Iran thinks that they can hurt America by supporting Sunni groups, they will. They do. They've gave aid and comfort to Al-Qaeda. So don't give me this nonsense that we keep hearing from these moronic talking heads that, oh, it's okay to trust the Taliban for our security because they really don't like this ISIS-K group. They don't like ISIS. Are you kidding? Here's a thought that a listener brought up yesterday. Especially given if Joe Biden plans to stick with the August 31st deadline, and I've been saying consistently that I think he will. Even through this, I think he will. A listener brought up an interesting point. You know, we're probably going to end up leaving some Americans behind. And there may be some who choose not to leave right now. Maybe they're very committed folks who work at, a non-governmental organization trying to help people in the rural parts of Afghanistan build a fresh water system so they don't have as many, kids dying of waterborne diseases. And maybe they just say, you know what, we're far enough out and we're not really near the battles and we're just going to stay. That could happen, right? Could happen. And maybe I'm sure there will be Afghans who get left behind, who worked with us, who we made a promise to evacuate and protect. And really, all these people who are standing outside the gate right now at the airport, however many are left after this horrific suicide bombing, all those people who are trying to get out, I bet the Taliban's taking pictures of them, right? Who are you? Why are you trying to get out? Did you work for America? Are you a journalist? Are you a woman who believes in letting girls go to school? Like that. Are all of those people hostages now? Like the American hostages in Iran in 1979, 80. Are they hostages now? What does that mean if we leave any Americans there or any Afghan, let's say, interpreters who worked for us? As my listener pointed out, what do you think the Taliban will do with them? I mean, obviously they might kill them, but they might also keep them captive in places that are near the Taliban leadership or other places and use them as human shields, use them to try to get money. After all, Barack Obama sent pallets of cash to Iran as a hostage payment. Yeah, I was horrified, saddened, angered, and ashamed yesterday and today. This is a stain that's going to be on America for a long time, and Joe Biden will take it to his grave. We'll be right back.
KHOW Denver, 630 KHOW, an iHeartRadio station. Available everywhere on our free iHeartRadio app. #1 for music, radio, and podcasts.